Recording. All right.
Morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the Freight Brokerage Mastery podcast. In today's episode, we will be covering just everything that has to do with your sales process, how to source the lead list, how to talk to customers, and if you are, you have been in the business for a while, this is gonna help you optimize your sales process. Um, my name is Eldis, and
I'm Brandon.
so Brandon, just kind of go over how do you first think about the sales process when it comes to freight brokerage specifically. You've been in sales before in other industries, but what is the difference between sales brokerage, sales in the freight brokerage market industry as opposed to other industries?
Sure. So, I mean, sales in general is tough. Everybody knows that. Everybody wants to be in sales or has thought about sales at some point in their career. Sales gives you a lot of different options for the path of your career, and it gives you a little bit more opportunity to earn more financially than some other segments out there in the industry. That's just because sales generates everything that the business needs in order to stay afloat. So, when you're thinking about sales, and especially when you're thinking about sales on a freight brokerage side, best thing to do, best practice to have is to have a plan of action. We've talked about it before in another podcast that we have. I believe we put out a newsletter about the sales cycle and the sales process step, or the life cycle of the sales process. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here today. I'm going to reference a lot of those steps in this podcast because I think it's important to have a plan. When you're talking about sales, you can't be all over the place. I mean, you really got to have a very deliberate plan. You got to think about it step by step, and you got to implement that plan. The worst thing you can do in sales, and really anything in life, is not have a plan. You don't want to be winging it. If you're getting on the phone or you're going to meet a client, you want to be prepared. And the first thing that you can do to be prepared is to have a plan, or to have a process that you can follow and keep yourself really guided as to what direction you're going. And it's also measurable to see where you're at in that sales process. And that way you can help formulate a plan as you continue down that sales process or the sales approach. So when we're talking about freight brokerage and we're developing sales processes and leads and trying to get our first customer, the first thing we want to look at, whether you're starting the business, you're brand new to it, or even if you're out there, some of this, you're going to say, hey, I've done this. But go back and take a look at it and really dissect it, because I think it's important for you to understand where you're at in the sales process and make sure that you do have a very calculated approach. And the first thing to the sales process is going to be your lead generation. You got to have people to call. So if you don't have people to call, again, you're going to be kind of all over the place. It's going to seem overwhelming at times because you don't have a list right there in front of you. You don't have something to go off of. So that's going to be your first step, and probably the most important step to make sure that you're successful when you're out there trying to get new business. And that's going to be your lead generation. And lead generation is exactly how it sounds. You're not doing anything more in this step than literally putting a list together of people that you want to approach, or companies that you want to approach out there that need freight brokerage services. So in the lead generation process, we've talked about before, you've decided on what niche you're going after, whether it's going to be refrigerated, dry van, flatbed, heavy haul, oversized loads, vessel, air, multimodal, rail, things of that nature. So whatever niche you're in, you're going to want to focus your lead list or lead generation specifically to them. Don't be all over the place. Don't have, 90 different people that you can call in reefer, and then another 90 in dry van, and so on and so forth. You want to be very calculated in your approach. It's going to help you stay organized. So lead generation is the first step. And with lead generation, once you've decided what your niche is, what you want to do, and I stress this to my employees, I stress it to people I've worked with in the past, other companies that I've talked to. When you're talking to your sales team or your sales individuals, or you yourself are looking at it for lead generation, you want to make sure that that list is very, very concentrated. And what I mean by that is you don't want to have a very robust list. You want to have a list that you can work off of very, very effectively, making sure that you're touching them weekly, daily, sometimes a couple times a day, So you want that list to be concentrated. You want it to be smaller. So in this instance, a lot of people say, more is better. Not in this instance. When you're talking about lead generation, actually less is better. And the reason I say that is because you got to be able to make contact and continue to develop relationships and conversations with people. And you can't do that if you have 500 people on your list that you got to call. Realistically, you're not going to touch 500 people in a week. You may be making 500 calls, but those calls are going to be, you know, through a multitude of the sales process. It's going to be, some of them are going to be new prospects that you're talking to, some are going to be carriers that you're talking to, some are going to be customers that you're talking to multiple times a day. So yes, you're going to be making multiple calls, but when we're specifically talking about new prospects and lead generation, we want that list to be very much smaller so that you can work off of that. And best practice here is to have a list of not more than 100. You don't want a list of more than 100 because realistically, again, you are not going to be contacting 100 new prospects every single week. You got to take into account, your current operations, what you're doing daily, and then say, hey, can I realistically call 100 people consistently every week on this list? So your list may actually even be smaller, but you don't want it to be more than 100. And out of that 100, you're going to have, a top 10, top 5, top 25 that you're going to be working off of, that you're really moving that conversation along with. So lead generation, have a list, but have a list that's very much smaller, more concentrated. And that's the best approach on that first segment of the sales process.
So that's awesome. So yeah, so once they have that list, I mean, well, let's go back before building the list, because you
Yeah.
mentioned like first you have to select your segment. So that's something we talked about in the past.
Yep.
Once they selected their segment, when it comes to building that list, I mean, who should they be looking to talk to? Who should they reach out to, as far as the person that they're gonna call, email. So who do you think they should be going after when it comes to, like, once they identify their ideal customer or prospect?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question because the $1 million answer is, when you're in sales and you're calling a company, is who do I talk to? Everybody, first thing that pops in your mind, I want to talk to the transportation manager. I want to talk to the logistics manager, director of transportation, whatever the case may be. That's what you're thinking. But that is the first problem that or hurdle that you're going to have to overcome, is who do I need to be talking to in that company? Who's the decision maker? And in reality, it could be a couple people. It may be more than one individual. You think transportation manager, but the transportation manager may be taking recommendations from their actual sales team. Maybe the salesperson has somebody that they really like to use, and they're telling the transportation manager or logistics manager or logistics coordinator, hey, I want to work with this company for X, Y, and Z reasons. So they're actually giving input to the transportation manager, who is going to select or put on the loads that they're using. So when you're looking at that, I would say be open-minded as to who you want to reach out to. And there's a lot of different ways to find out who you want to reach out to. There's wonderful resources out there available to you. I'll call out Zoom Info right now. That is a very, very useful tool. It's great in my mind. It gives you the exact titles of those individuals inside the company, and it gives you their contact information, whether it be email, direct phone number, sometimes even cell phone number, because what it does is it captures the information that's in their signature. If they're involved with Zoom Info in any way, it's capturing data from their Outlook on their signature. So you're getting really good information on there. So use those resources that you have. You can also use things like LinkedIn. You can use Facebook. I mean, sometimes on company websites, you'll have contacts in there for the transportation department. So a couple different ways you can go about it. But when you're looking to talk to somebody inside a company, don't be tunnel vision just on the logistics manager. Maybe you're not getting anywhere with the logistics manager. Okay, then let's do a pivot and let's talk to somebody in sales and find out what exactly lanes that they're handling, or what companies that they're dealing with, so that you can understand what their needs are, and maybe you can sell to them, develop a relationship with them. They can put in a good word for you with the transportation manager, or they can help you develop a relationship with the transportation manager inside that company. So it's really multifaceted. You don't want to focus on just one individual necessarily. Sometimes you will have to focus on one individual. You may call sales and they say, hey, you need to talk to so and so over in the logistics department or a coordinator. Get with them. That's okay. If you do have to do that, I would go in talking to the transportation manager and reference, hey, I talked to this individual over here in sales. They said you're the individual to talk to. This is what we talked about, and then continue on your relationship development in there and try to work towards a close on that. So when you're talking about who you need to talk to inside of a company, keep an open mind there. Don't be tunnel vision or focus directly on the transportation manager, because sometimes it's okay to call out and get a relationship with sales too, because sales, they really they care about how their shipments are held too. Yes, the transportation manager is going to be dealing with you throughout the process once you get the business, but the transportation manager is also answering to the sales department, because if something goes wrong on a shipment, they have to go back and they have to report it to the individual that made the sale to their client, and then that salesperson has to go back to their client and report that information as well too.
Mhm.
So you want to be able to ideally get a relationship with everybody inside of that company, sales, transportation, logistics coordinator, be known inside that company all the way through. Don't just be on the transportation side talking directly to the transportation manager.
That is a great point because I feel like a lot of people in sales overall, not just a freight brokerage, they focus on the decision maker and that's all they go after. When, that person is probably getting not only getting a bunch of calls from other people, from, 1,000 companies to sell them, but also they are busy, right? They're busy doing a lot of stuff that is required in their job. So what, going after and also doing research, you like if you are just going after the decision maker, you're probably getting hung up on, you're dealing with a gatekeeper. Once you go, on the low, like to the lower side of things, like sales or even the person below them, you're getting more information. You're getting like somebody that's gonna sell for you almost,
Yeah,
in that company. But now, so you have a list of 100 like prospects, ideal prospects that you're gonna, work on for whatever period of time. So how many times should people reach out to one specific company until, say they give up and find a different company to reach out to? And what are some qualification, I guess, criterias that you personally used or you coach your sales team to use so that they're not also wasting time on companies that are not qualified?
sure. I mean, that's a great question. When you're looking at a company, especially on the freight brokerage side, you got to look at what you're bringing to the table before you even qualify these companies. In order to qualify the company, you have to look at yourself first and say, okay, what am I and what am I bringing to the table? Well, obviously, excuse me, you're part of a freight brokerage network. You're either the broker, you work for a company that is a brokerage. So what you do is you are targeting companies that have higher volume shipments, have a lot of moving parts. There's nothing wrong with what I call the mom and pop operations that have, 4 or 5 shipments a week. They're great filler customers. The challenge there for you as a freight broker is that those companies probably, if they've been in business for even a couple years, they have a whole list of people, to your point, that they have talked to over the course of those years that have been calling them, whether it's freight brokerage, asset-based companies, freight forwarders, things of that nature. They're already calling and talking to them. So these people have a whole Rolodex, if you will, of companies that they can reach out to. So to get their attention, it's really going to be tough for you. You want to focus on companies that have a lot of moving parts. I don't want to say complex because it doesn't have to be complex, but the more complex the operation is, the better opportunities you're going to have to insert yourself into that operation because of what you can bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
There are advantages for companies to work with freight brokers outside of asset-based companies, and we can get into that later, maybe in
Let,
another podcast or even in this one.
Well, let's touch base on that real fast because I think that's part of the I would say that's a very important part of the sales process because once they reach out to those companies and they're comparing you with a bunch of other brokerages, they're comparing you against asset-based carriers. Like what it's I guess what are the main three things that a brokerage should know or should I guess use to differentiate themselves and why the company that they're reaching out to should even hire them or work with them to.
Sure. So again, that's a good point. Good question. When you're reaching out to these companies, in order to differentiate yourself, the first thing you're going to hear to your point is you're going to hear a lot of no's. We work with asset-based companies already. Look, I love that response from clients. They want to keep their assets in business. Well, look, as a freight broker, you represent a lot of owner operators in smaller fleets. Think about this. If you're working with these smaller fleets and these owner operators that are out there and they own their own trucks, these guys or girls do not have the time to do what you're doing. They don't have the time while they're driving, moving these shipments across the United States to jump on the phone at the same time and do the prospecting that you're doing and try to drudge up new business. So they rely on the freight brokers out there to keep their operation running. It's easier for them to call a freight broker and say, hey, what do you have? Do you have anything coming out of the Northeast? Do you have anything coming out of the West? So when you're talking to companies and you get that initial objection is we only work with asset-based carriers, guess what? You do too. You represent the smaller asset owner operator division of the industry. And by doing that, you're allowing the industry to have a healthier balance. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want, and they don't want either, realistically, to be working with just larger group asset-based companies. One, they don't have the flexibility. If they're working with a large asset-based company who relies on them for a specific lane shipment for their front haul or back haul, there is no flexibility there. So if they have rejections, if they have diversions in transit where they need to go somewhere else, it's really tough for an asset-based carrier to accommodate them on that level and say, hey, we can make that happen. As a freight broker who represents the smaller companies who reach out to us for shipments, you are able to make that adjustment for them. So I would really stand on the fact that, look, I understand that you're working with the asset-based broker or the asset-based companies, and that's really good. I represent the owner operators and the smaller fleet companies who have a lot more flexibility to adjust to any kind of in-transit deviations or claim situations or damage situations or redelivery situations on the back end. And the reason for that is because we are open, we don't have back hauls, and we don't have front hauls. So we're able to make those adjustments. And the other part of that is too, is it keeps the market more in check. The market, obviously, we've talked about this in the past. It's up, it's down, rates are high, rates are low. If you diminish the supply of the owner operators and the smaller fleets, then you put the complete control into these larger asset-based companies, and that allows them to set the market. And we don't want anybody setting the market. It's almost a monopoly, if you will. This is the rate. There is no more for your clients that you're talking to go out there and shop around. Because what we did by not keeping these owner operators running and in business in these smaller fleets is we've really diminished the supply of the trucks out there to handle these shipments. So now the price is the price, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't want that. So those are a couple of things that you can really talk to your clients about or your prospects about when they give you that objection. Hey, we only work with asset-based companies. Yet I agree with you. I do too. I represent the smaller fleets, these guys that are way more flexible. They're able to help you with any kind of in transit deviations. And this also allows you to shop the market. By coming to me, you don't have to make 100 calls to your asset-based companies and gather rates. You call me, I will do that for you with our small fleets and our owner operators that we work with, who I represent, and I will do the rate shopping for you and
Mm-hmm.
bring you the best rate with the best qualified carrier for that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. So and besides that, is there anything that you used personally when in your brokerage to differentiate differentiate yourself past that too, because obviously that's the benefit of using a brokerage. But once everybody has that, everybody serves that function of like, hey, I will do the shopping of, I'll find the carriers for you. I will manage the load. I will track and all that stuff. What is what is something else that you personally use, that your team personally used to, compete against other freight brokerages in your same market?
Sure. So that really comes down to understanding what the client's needs are, and you're going to understand that through multiple conversations. When you go out and you're trying to sign a client, it's not going to be a 1-2 conversation deal. You're going to have multiple conversations with this client before you ever seal a deal, unless you catch
Hmm.
them at a very vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
And in that instance, I would recommend that you be very competitive with your pricing still too as well, especially if it's like during the holidays or something. You don't want to gouge them because you want them to come back and say, hey, this was a
Yeah.
fair rate. They helped me out during this time. But I think what differentiates you as a broker versus an asset-based carrier is one, the communication. We talked about this in the past too. You really want to be over communicating with your clients. You don't want them to have to reach out to you with updates for your shipments. You're going to find that a lot of these larger asset-based carriers, they do have truck managers or dispatchers that work for them, but typically their communication is really not that great. They're still getting reached out to by the client saying, hey, where's my shipment? Can you give me an update on that? You can really differentiate yourself right there with the communication by making sure they have their morning and evening updates long before they ever ask for
Hmm.
it. Theoretically, they should never have to ask for it.
Yeah.
So communication is really where you want to stand on first. The second thing also too is, you're not just rate shopping for them and tracking and tracing for them, and you're not just doing the communication for them. You're handling the problems that arise. Look, this is transportation. There's always going to be a problem, whether it's a late truck, whether it's a broke down truck or a claim. And this is really where you can make your bones in the industry with your communication and setting yourself apart from these asset-based carriers. Let's look at a broke down truck for a second here. When you're talking to an asset-based carrier, who is just a common contract authority versus a brokerage authority. If that truck breaks down in transit and they're talking to their client, your client's been working with this asset-based carrier, and they get their update in the morning for them or the evening, and the truck says, hey, we broke down at this location. It's going to be 1 to 2 days before we can get it fixed. That's a problem. That's a problem for the client. That's a problem for their sales team. That's a problem for who they're selling to, because
Hmm.
their product's not going to make it on time. Whether it's refrigerated or just-in-time inventory for production, that's a real problem. And if you're dealing with an asset-based carrier, they're not going to be able to recover those loads and get them moving again because they are limited by their fleet. If they do not have an empty truck that they can move over to that down truck and repower it, then they have a problem. They have to wait for that fix to happen. As a broker, you have the ability to reach out to your vast network
Yeah.
and repower that truck. Maybe you lose a couple hours, but you don't lose a couple days.
Yeah.
So you can get that truck moving again much quicker than an asset-based carrier. So that's something that you can really stand on, in your sales process when you're talking to a client too, about, what differentiates yourself and why use a freight broker versus an asset-based carrier. Again, it comes down to flexibility and adaptability. We're able to repower those trucks and get them moving again so that we don't miss the on-time delivery. And if we do, we're not missing it by days because we're waiting for this truck to get fixed or the trailer to get fixed. We're able to
Hmm.
repower it. We're able to find the cross dock to move it to the trailer, the other trailer, whatever the case may be. So that's one thing that you can use in your sales process. The other thing too is the claim process. This is a really big headache for customers out there when we're talking about claims. When a claim happens, everybody wants to throw up their hands. There's a lot of finger pointing going on here, and it becomes a hassle. Whatever you have on the back of that truck has value. And so everybody wants to be able to recoup the value of that product. And that's usually done through the insurance process, or working out a payment schedule or whatever.
Hmm.
As a freight broker, you want to make them understand that, look, we work through the claim process for you. You will not have to do anything with that. If a claim damage does happen in transit, we will handle that process for you from start to finish. We will do the conversations or communication between the carrier, between the insurance company, between the adjuster, and we will handle that and make sure that it gets taken care of when it does happen. If you're working with an asset-based carrier, you may go days, weeks without any kind of communication, or you may never hear from them again. They just say, hey,
Yeah.
you know what? We don't really need the business. We're not going to pay this. We disagree with your assessment of the claims. We don't think we're responsible. The shipper didn't load it correctly. The receiver unloaded it incorrectly. They
Yeah.
didn't count the product correctly. So they may just ghost the client altogether. As a freight brokerage, you need to be very well versed in handling claims and dealing with those claims. And I think we've talked about that past on
Yep.
a podcast as well too. So those are two of the things that you really want to focus on, again, with advantages to working with a freight brokerage like yourself versus working with the asset-based carriers.
Perfect. Yeah. And then, so one of the things that we talked about when we first did the video on the 7 steps sales process was the research that you did before, building or reaching out. So the pre-call planning. And we'll not
Yep.
have time to go through the whole 7 steps today. So we will focus just on the lead generation, like actually building the list, making sure that it's a solid, high quality list. Um, so when it comes to the research, can you give them some websites or publications that you go to kind of research the company a little bit? And what is your process behind the research to find out like actually useful information?
Sure. So that's a great question. I mean, once you've built your lead list, you've done your lead generation, you got your list, you're ready to start calling. That first call to a client is always, is very stressful. It puts a lot of stress on you. You sit there and you look at that phone for about 10 minutes before you even start dialing numbers. The best way to alleviate that stress is to be prepared. Just like anything, if you think of it like a sports, I'll use sports analogy here. You don't go into a game without a plan. So same thing with sales. Make sure that you have a plan. You're ready to execute that plan. You have contingency plans. So if it doesn't go the way that you want it to go, but you've generated your list, you're ready to make your open call. So now the research goes into it before you make your opening call. First thing you want to do for that research is you want to make sure you know who you need to talk to. And again, we touched on Zoom a little bit here. Try to find out who it is you actually need to talk to and have a backup plan. Again, we talked about transportation managers or logistics coordinators. Also think about the sales department. So have those three things in mind when you're doing your research on these companies. And you can do that in a multiple different ways when you're doing your research to find the individual. You can do it through Zoom. You can do it through LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great tool too. A lot of people put up their professional profiles on LinkedIn, what they do during the day. I mean, they have literally a description on LinkedIn of what they do. Zoom info will help you identify who it is you need to talk to,
Right.
but it doesn't end there. What is their job? What does that entail? Maybe you found somebody on Zoom that's a logistics coordinator and you're thinking, all you heard in that was logistics. So immediately you're thinking, that's the person I got to talk to. Maybe, maybe not. Let's do a little bit more research and find out. So you found that individual's name. Now let's dive deeper. Go on to LinkedIn and see if they have a LinkedIn profile. If they do, take a look at that profile and see what their daily activities include. What do they do for the company? Are they in charge of setting appointments? Are they in charge of carrier selection? What are they in charge of? So understanding what that position entails before you call is a good idea when you're doing your research. Also in the research, what you want to do too, after you identified somebody and you found out you did a little bit more research on that individual and you found out what their daily activities are, now you want to understand the company. Yep, you got your niche, you know that they're doing flatbed, dry van, reefer, whatever the case may be, but you want to understand a little bit more about that company and what they're doing. So best bet, check out their website, get a little bit about the company. How long have they been in business? What is their company focused on? Do they have a footprint map? A lot of companies have their footprint map on their website of where they do business and sometimes who they do business with. So understand that, but you want to know a little bit about the company too, because when you're doing your research, you're also trying to find a way to make a connection with this company. That's the biggest thing in sales is making the connection. If you cannot make the connection between yourself and that prospect, chances are the sale's not going to go anywhere unless you catch them in a very vulnerable state. So you need to be able to have some information to go off of to make that connection that makes it relevant to them and says, hey, you know what? I'm talking to this individual, this freight broker. It sounds like they do the exact same thing that we do. It sounds like they're running the exact same lanes that we're running. Chances are they're working with our competitors. I would love to take away some of my competitors' options. So maybe I work with this individual. So you want to make sure you understand your company and be able to make sure that you can make a connection with their company after you find out who that individual is that you need to talk to and what their daily, activities look like inside the company.
So when it comes to that sales process, the first call, the opening call, after that, is that when you do all your research? Like on, to kind of get more data on the company, or how do you go about research? Because obviously, if you work a 8-hour day or 12-hour day, you only have so much time to do research before a cold call that, maybe they won't even pick it up. Right. So what is your thought process about that? Do you start doing like really deep research once you make a connection, or?
Yeah, so back to the opening call there, I think it's important for people to understand that the opening call, one, it's going to be it's not going to go how you think it's going to go. They're not going to hand over their business to you because they don't know you. It's really an introduction call. It's an introduction of yourself to them for consideration. And at that point, they're not going to consider you. Let's just be honest.
Right.
You mean nothing to them. They get, to your point, they get hundreds of calls a week, maybe daily, who knows, depending on the size of the company that get filtered through. So you're really not going to turn their eye on the first call. And it's important for you to recognize that on the first call. So when you did your research before you made the call, keep your research very, very simple. You can master this, and it shouldn't take you more than a couple minutes to do some pre-call planning, if you will, and that's your research before you make that opening call. That research should include nothing more than a little bit about the company, where they're located, what types of commodities they're in, maybe a little bit of footprint, shipping, origin, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you make that first call, you need to recognize that one, they are busy. Two, they get a lot of calls just like you. And three, they're not just going to hand over your freight or their freight to you. So that first call is an introduction, and you would be best served on that call to recognize their time and that they don't have any and that they're busy, because they are busy. So, your opening call can be as simple as, this is so and so with whatever freight brokerage you're working for. I understand that you're busy. I'm going to keep this brief. So you recognize right away that your time is valuable, client, prospect. I'm not going to take a lot of it and try to keep you on the phone for 10, 15 minutes. I just wanted to call, introduce myself. The reason I did was because of this. And that goes back to your research.
Mm-hmm.
You are working in this segment. I see that you are moving on these lanes. You service these clients, and then try to, again, make that first connection right there. We do the same thing. We run these lanes. I wanted to get you my information for consideration. Your first call is very, very brief. I would say no more than 2 to 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Is what that first call is going to be. And if you do make the top end of that 4 minutes, great, you did really good, but don't expect that first call to be a lot. So that opening research is nothing more to get you in and introduce yourself and try to make that initial connection. After you hang up that call, it's always best practice to send up an email. Obviously, you can ask for an email on the phone. Chances are they're going to be guarded. They're not going to give it to you because they don't want you flooding their emails with a bunch of sales. They have other emails that are coming in that concern actual business that they need to attend to. So you can ask for it. Chances are you won't get it. But again, I will revert you back to Zoom info.
Yeah.
They have that information on there. So you don't even necessarily, if you have Zoom info, you don't even need to ask for that. You can cut that step right out. You don't have to be intrusive with that question.
Mm-hmm.
You already have the information. So go ahead and use the information. Send a follow-up email thanking them for their time. You can put something in there. I'd like to talk to you again in the future. I look forward to talking to you. I look forward to earning your business, not doing business with you, because at the end of the day, you are earning their business. You
Mm-hmm.
are bringing something to the table for them to consider that is going to earn their business. It's going to earn the opportunity for you to get them to place shipments with you. So I like to use that term a lot. Let them understand that you want to earn it. You don't expect it. I want to earn it. I want to earn it by doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So send up the follow-up email. And then to answer your question, the research continues. The research never stops. So you don't have to spend an hour on each company because you don't have time for that either. You
Yeah.
probably have other shipments going on. So you don't have to do that. But if you've identified somebody that definitely fits inside of what you're doing for your business, and you know that through your qualification process that they're a viable prospect client and somebody that you really want to do business with, you continue to learn more about them. You have the contact information already. You understand where they're located. You understand the commodity that they're running right now. Hopefully, you understand some of their origin shipping points and destinations at this point. But then after that, then it becomes just follow up research. Think about it as reading the news or listening to the news every day. You're getting a little bit of information about what's going on in your community, some businesses outside in the community that you're in. This is no different. You want to do some Google researches. Google's your best friend here. I mean, we got the technology here. Don't underplay it. Really use it to your advantage here. You can plug in their name. You're going to find, because they have a marketing team, they have a press release team that works for these companies, and they put out information on themselves to the public.
Mm-hmm.
So use that information for your research. Get in there, plug it into Google, and find out everything that you can find out over a course of time on this company. Read the press releases, whether it's on their website, whether it's something that you found on Google. Maybe they're introducing a new product. Maybe they're having some challenges, with production or sales of slid or whatever the case may be. Find out everything that you can on this company over the course of this sales cycle so that you can use this in your future conversations. Because your follow-up calls after the opening call need to have some substance. You cannot just jump on a call after an opening call with a client. And I see this pitfall all the time, Aldis. I really do. I've heard it on my team. I've heard it in other companies. I've heard it from almost every single sales individual that I've talked to or listened to on their phone calls with clients. What are you working on today? How can I help you? Those are close-ended questions. That's an
Mm-hmm.
immediate no. How can I help you? You ain't helping me. Are you
Yeah.
saying I can't do my job?
Well,
That's an insult.
why should they even trust you in the first place? You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, you're not helping them do anything. They've been doing this for probably several
yeah,
years or a couple years. So you're insulting them. You're not helping me.
yeah,
Don't use that. Don't go in with that. And what are you working on? Nothing.
yeah.
There's no substance to that question. What are you working
Mm-hmm.
on today? And that's how a lot of people, they just run through these calls, 100 calls. I just want to hit my 100 call, limit for the day. What are you working on? Nothing. Okay, well, if something comes up, give me a call.
Yeah.
They're not going to give you a call. Or how can I help you today? I'm all
Right.
set. All right, well, if something comes up, give me a call.
Yeah.
That's it. That's where the conversation ends. So your research really helps you on the next conversations. Hey, I saw an article come out. I was reading in whatever publication you found them in. I saw an article come out, and then talk about what that article had to say.
Yeah.
Make it seem to them that you are truly invested in, again,
Mm-hmm.
earning their business, making a difference for them, not only for their company, but for the individual that you're talking to. You want to relay or portray the fact that you bring something to the table that is going to make their life easier on their side and help their company further their footprint, whether that's helping them manage multiple shipments throughout the day, um, whether it's taking or putting time back on their plate to deal with their team, their sales team, whoever else helps them on the transportation side. So, the research never stops, to answer your question. You always want to be checking it out. These companies are ever evolving. There's always something going on with them. They're doing the same thing. You got to remember, their sales team is doing exactly what you're
Yeah.
doing. They're reaching out, trying to get new business for their company. You're doing the same thing for yourself or for your company. So continue the research. Don't ever stop with it. Constantly use Google. Get into some industry publications. If you're in manufacturing, there's a lot of them out there. If you're in refrigeration, again, there's a lot of them out there. Or simply typing in the name of the company and seeing what pops up. you're going to get multiple results. Try to dive deep on that. Doesn't matter if it's something that happened last month, last year. It gives you more information on the company, how they evolved, and how they're continuing to evolve. And that will set up your next conversation, because your follow-up conversations have to have some substance. It's not what can I help you with, and what are you working on today?
Right.
Go in with those conversations. Now, as you get further down the sales cycle here, you got a little bit of rapport with them. You've learned a little bit about them. And this is a good thing too, that, I didn't touch on, but I highly recommend it. I personally don't have a Facebook. I'm not a big Facebook guy, but Facebook is open, in a lot of cases, where you can find out information on people. So you can just plug in their name. You got the name of the individual. See if you can find out some information on them. Maybe you have something that is relatable to the two of you. Maybe they like sports. Maybe they have a family. Maybe they're hunters, fishers. Maybe they're into arts, whatever the case may be. Those things will also help you with a conversation. You got to remember, sales is, again, about making a connection with that counterpart on the other line. So it doesn't always have to be about getting business for them. Maybe you're sending them a happy holidays or happy birthday. I saw it was your birthday, or hey, what do you got going on for the weekend? Or, are you hunting? Are you fishing? Who's your favorite sports team? I saw your sports team this weekend. Tough loss or great win, something to that effect. Again, you're not only trying to make a connection with the two companies, you're trying to make a connection individually between you and your counterpart on the other side of that line. So while you're learning about the company, you also need to learn about the individual on the other line.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, you're trying to solve a problem for them, which is either to make him more money or to save him more time. It's really that simple. But before we wrap it up, let's talk about just the prospecting side of things. What are some expectations that, especially new brokers who are just getting into the freight brokerage sales side of things? Like, what are some expectations? So number one, what should their daily activity be at minimum, right, to be successful? And two, what should they expect? How, like, what's the sales cycle? Like, how many calls should they expect on average to make to get a first customer, first load? Just because I think a lot of people expect to just make 100 calls and then they have a book of business. Some people just avoid making calls at all because they, in their mind, cold calling doesn't work. No one likes to get cold calls. So, there's a lot of, I guess, bad advice out there, or just bad, just not understanding how the numbers game works when it comes to, cold outreach.
Yeah. So, I mean, great question, because everybody goes through this in the sales process. First thing I will say is, when you're starting out, especially in this industry, everybody knows right now the industry is very tough. It's tough to get new business coming on. People aren't signing on clients or brokers like they used to. It's just that type of market. So I would go in keeping your expectations low. I know that's not what everybody wants to hear here, but that's the reality. Keep your expectations low. Don't think that you're going to make 100 calls and you're going to sign 10 clients. That's not going to happen. So realistically, you're going to make 100 calls and you're going to sign 0. So you made 100 calls, you made opening calls, you made follow-up calls. You're still not getting business. That's okay. That is part of the sales process. Believe it or not, a lot of rejection. Anybody that is, whether you're starting out or you've been in this industry a lot, for a while, rejection is the name of the game in this industry, especially as a freight broker. They don't trust you. You got to earn their business, like we talked about. So keep your expectations low. You got this list of 100. I mean, realistically, I would say by the 10th call, you should have had good enough conversations. You should have made a good enough connection where you are at least at the point where you're able to start pricing for them on their shipments after the 10th call. Sometimes it's before, sometimes it's a little bit after. But if you've made 40 calls to this client and that conversation hasn't even got you to the point where you're in a position to start pricing lanes for them, one of two things. One, we didn't do enough research and we didn't make a connection. So we didn't do that properly. Or two, they're just not a viable prospect. It's okay to remove people from your prospect list. That list is going to be
Yeah.
ever changing, whether you sign them and you move somebody in their place or you just remove them completely for
Yeah.
whatever reason because you're not getting the opportunity, which you don't want to do because time is a factor as a freight broker. Everybody knows that. You don't want to waste your time where you're not getting traction.
Yeah.
So if you're not getting traction after, 10, 15 calls to be in a position to price, then it's time to move on. I'm not saying completely forget them, but don't waste too much more energy on them right now. Go back, redo your research list, your lead generation list, and put somebody else in their place and start the process over again.
Yeah.
Because you want to constantly be moving that around here. But keep your expectations low. It's going to take a minute to even get your first client. Statistically, I've heard a lot of different numbers, but in my experience, what I have seen is for every time you talk to a client out of your 100 call list or 100 lead list, out of 100 leads, you're going to sign one. So think
Yeah.
about that for a minute. You're going to
Yeah.
go through 1,000 different prospects and have multiple conversations before you ever sign 10.
Yeah.
So it's constantly calling and getting out there. Don't downplay the cold calling. That's how you make connection. Think about it when you're out there, and I know we've talked about this on another
Yeah.
podcast. You can't make a connection through email. There is no connection, and emails can be interpreted in many different ways. Tonality is not cannot be given or taken in an email.
Hmm.
Tones come off different in an email versus a
Yeah.
human to human conversation. So you really need to get out there. You need to hit the phone. You need to make those cold calls. And if you're worried about having those conversations and making that connection, I challenge you. And again, we talked about this on the other podcast. I challenge you to get out there in your daily life, daily activities, your personal life, and learn how to have those conversations, whether it's at the supermarket, you're talking to the cashier. I mean, everybody has gone to the supermarket and gone grocery shopping. How many times have you just stood there and you both just kind of look at each other as they're scanning stuff? You're just looking at each other and you don't realize it, but it's awkward. Have a
Yeah.
conversation with them. Learn how to understand and make that connection. How's your day going? You guys look busy today. Anything planned for yourself? Been working all day? Have that conversation. Another great one, again, we talked about this in another podcast, the elevator. Anybody that's ever been in an elevator knows that you can hear a pin drop in an elevator. Nobody's talking. You're all in a confined little space and nobody wants to talk. It's okay to have a conversation with somebody. This will sharpen your skills for the phone as well too. Yes, it's in person. Yes, you're having a face-to-face conversation, but it also relates to the phone. It helps you start that
Yeah.
conversation and keep that conversation going. So you really need to hone your skills on the interpersonal communication as well out there in your personal life because that's going to translate into the phone conversations as well too. So don't skip the cold calling process to answer your question. You cannot skip the phone call
Yeah.
or the cold calling process. Emails won't get it done, people. It will not get it done. You may get lucky here and there on an email campaign, but an email campaign is nothing more than maybe to get an interested party. You're still going to have to talk to them.
Yeah.
Maybe you get somebody to respond on your email ad campaign or whatever you're doing. You're still going to have to pick up the phone and talk to them. So you really need to be sharp with your conversations, be comfortable
Yeah.
in yourself, be able to carry on a conversation, make a connection, and move the conversation forward.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, I believe that too. I think that's prospecting and cold calling is not something you can just, find a way to avoid it. Like you have to make the calls. Even with email, like you mentioned, email it's just a lead generation tool. Like it's gonna get you an interested response, but you still have to talk to them to be able to
Correct.
close the deal. Like there's no way you're gonna close the deal through email, especially
No.
when you're talking about, like such an important thing, which is
Yeah.
like no one is gonna trust you of an email conversation. Like it's just not gonna happen.
Nope.
And just to wrap it up, what are some tools that you use, like CRMs, or like any dialing systems? How do you go about it? Because in other industries, you have like Salesforce or other CRMs, or even dialers that allow you to get more cold calls. Do you recommend that, or when it comes to like freight brokerage, or?
I don't. So I've heard a lot of companies that I've talked to over the past outsource cold calling. I I don't think that's a good idea.
Mm,
Again, for just what we're talking about here, you can't make a connection. Okay, they did the cold calling for you. They did the opening call. In theory, and in reality, even not even in theory, in reality, if they do make the opening call for you and they say, hey, this individual is interested, guess what? They're transferring it to you. And guess what? You still have an opening call.
yeah,
So why have them do that? You know, to me, it's a waste of money. It is a numbers game, and that's why they're doing it. And I get that because they are focused specifically on making those calls and they're passing them over to you. But it's nothing more than the email campaign, ad campaign that you're talking about. You know, they're doing the work for you on the opening call, but again, you still have to make the opening call and make that connection.
yeah,
You know, the CRMs, they're great out there, and you should use them because the CRMs keep you focused, they keep you on track. You mentioned Salesforce. Salesforce is a great tool out there. It's a great CRM. There's a lot of different CRMs out there, so it really comes down to what you have in your budget. But I
yeah,
highly recommend that you have a CRM and not just use it on an Excel spreadsheet, because CRMs offer a couple different things. One, you can get a pipeline lead generation list going on there. You can also add in notes specifically to them. It's kind of like a
yeah,
automated or a technology Rolodex, if you will.
yeah,
So you can pull up just the profile of that company. You can enter some notes for reference for the next call. And that's what I recommend those CRMs for. They don't have to be really robust. You can set calendar reminders in a lot of them and stuff
yeah,
like that to help keep you on track. But the CRMs, excuse me, the CRMs are extremely important because they help you keep track of your conversations. Again, if you're talking to, or you have a lead list of 100 and you're talking to 100 people a day or a week or whatever the case may be, you're not going to remember those conversations. So when you get done with a conversation, whether it be opening or the 10th call or 100th call of a client, put some notes in there on that call. What did you talk about? Because before you make your next call, what you should be doing is pulling up that profile of that company and looking at your old notes in there that you made from the last calls, the last several calls. What have I talked about?
hmm
Where did the conversation go? What do I need to talk about now? What haven't we talked about? And that's going to keep you on track and move you through the sales cycle a lot faster. If you can go back and look at your conversations and see what you've talked about, it helps you formulate your next call. So I really recommend the CRMs. I think it keeps you organized. I think it keeps your thoughts right there for you. You don't have to remember it, enter it. You can
yeah,
forget it, go back and review it later. As far as the phone systems and those calling of that nature, like we talked about, I don't recommend them. To each their own for a company, but you're still going to have to make the opening call. It doesn't matter if they make, you know, a lead generation call for you and they transfer it over to you. You're still in the same position in the sales cycle. You still have to make the opening call. You still have to make the connection. You still have to do the
yeah,
research. What's the
yeah.
point?
And just for clarification, so I think those SDR teams, like the outsourced lead generation, has their place in other industries. But when I was mentioning the dialers, I'm talking about, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but there's like tools that dial multiple prospects at the same time for you until
Ooh.
one picks up. Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that for, and if I'm understanding it correctly, and
yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's dialing multiple people and seeing who picks up,
yeah.
if they both pick up at the same time, one of them is going to be on hold. You can't talk to two of them at the same time. So if you're using that tool, I wouldn't recommend it because they're not going to stay on hold anyway. As soon as they hear that hold music,
No, yeah. So it's those are new tools that are coming up in the outbound like game where like it dials say four numbers at the same time.
mhm.
The one that picks up, the other ones it's some AI system that like it doesn't pick up both numbers at the same time. It's just the first one that picks up, the other ones
Wow.
hang up. It's
But then it still has to transfer it to you, correct?
no, it's right there
Just connects automatically.
right away. Yeah, just like it's
Okay.
yeah.
That
Do
might be
you?
interesting. I mean, I've never used something like
Yeah.
that. It may work, but it seems like that would be like a hey, surprise, you got a call
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
line.
I
You
agree.
may not be prepared for it because you don't
Yeah,
know who it is.
yeah,
So again, I like to go in and dial my own numbers because I know exactly who I'm calling, who I'm trying
yeah,
to reach, what company it is. I'm prepared for that call. I don't like to be
yeah,
surprised. And if you're in sales, you probably shouldn't be surprised by a phone call popping in because you want to
yeah.
be prepared.
No, I agree. I think those are great for other like I said, industries where it's a very high like heavy volume game where
Sure.
anybody could be your, your prospect.
Yep.
But yeah, so CRMs I think they're really really important. I think if you use them to to its full capacity, you can there's a lot of money that you might be leaving on the table because you're forgetting about, like you said, notes and
Yep.
forgetting about the last conversation. And when you're in the game long enough, you will forget. Like, I mean, it's just
Oh,
gonna happen. So,
100%.
so what are the top three CR? Like, do you have a list of CRMs that you recommend they sign up to?
I don't. Again, it's personal preference. Some of your TMS software comes with CRMs. You know what?
Mm,
I guess what you have to ask yourself is, what do you want to use the CRM for? What capabilities do you think it needs to have for your sales team or for yourself? What I would say about any CRM is look at it before you purchase it or rent it or whatever the case may be. It doesn't have to be a bunch of bells and whistles. It really
hmm.
doesn't. Not in this game. You really want the CRM to be very straightforward and user friendly. Again, we're just trying to keep a list of your prospects and your clients and notes, and as far as call times and when you called them inside that CRM, maybe some calendar reminders. So, I don't have a list that, I would recommend one over the other. It comes down
Hmm.
to personal preference, but make sure when you're choosing your CRM, it fits exactly what you think that you need, and don't overcomplicate it. Don't get
Yeah.
something that's going to be way a bunch of bells and whistles, because in reality, inside the freight brokerage game, you don't need it. You just need a CRM that is going to keep you organized, somewhere you can go back and look at your previous calls with notes in there, and maybe set a calendar reminder for you for a follow-up call that you discussed on the last call or something like that. Doesn't have to be overcomplicated.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we have to wrap it up. So again, make sure you guys, subscribe to the channel so that you can keep getting more content like this. If you want to get a full breakdown of the 7 steps sales process that, Brandon used to scale his brokerage to, 42 million in revenue in yearly revenue, click the link below and we'll send it over to you. And then one last thing, if you are a new broker, I think this is a great podcast for you because you're getting perspective from somebody that's not only built a brokerage and exited the brokerage. I mean, you've been working with a lot of brokerages. You stay current with the industry just because we're working with a ton of other brokerages um, that are right now struggling, right? Because it's not the same market as it was before, like a few years ago. But you're also getting questions from somebody that's not in the game. Like it's a complete outsider's perspective, especially if you're just starting in the business. So there are questions that I'm asking that I'm just like interested in as if I was getting into the game. So, anyways, Brandon, do you have anything else to say?
No, the struggle's real, but hey, look, again, the market is cyclical. I know it's tough right now. Keep listening to the podcast. We got great information on here. Again, like I tell you every time, I want you to succeed. I'm going to help you succeed. So this information is very, very valuable to you, whether you're brand new or whether you've been in the game for a while. Don't discount the information. If you have questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to jump on a call with you. You'll be talking to me specifically, nobody on my team. You'll get a one-on-one. So if you have questions, you want answers, give me a call, drop me an email. I will get in contact with you. I want to see you guys succeed out there. It's a tough industry. The struggle is real, but you will get through it.